I've been on a bit of a dystopian B-movies that rip off more famous franchises binge recently, so it's no surprise that this week's retrospective is exactly that. So let's take a look back at Neon City, which is a 1991 Canadian post-apocalypse science fiction film directed by Monty Markham. This didn't let me down, being John Ford's Stagecoach set in the Mad Max universe. But before I get ahead of myself, let's start at the very beginning. Anne Louise Hamilton, who co-wrote the script with Jeff Begun and was better known for her TV writing work on programs such as 30 Something, for which she won 2 Emmys, had the idea to update John Ford's Stagecoach, taking the plot for that film literally word for word, but we will get to that later, and setting it in a Mad Max-esque post-apocalyptic world ravaged by ecological disaster. Due to the fact she had faced sexism earlier in her career, she actually shopped the script around under the pseudonym Buck Finch. Originally, the protagonist was a female character, but the producers decided to cast Michael Ironside in the role instead, of course changing the role into a male one. Being a made-for-TV movie, there are no box office details of course, and critical reception over the years has been mixed, with TV Guide writing in a review from 1991, Neon City is far from the worst Road Warrior rerun ever, although that's truly faint praise. As for me, I had seen this a few times over the years and it gives you exactly what it says it will on the box every time. Stagecoach in a Mad Max world, Michael Ironside and some cheap 90s action thrills. Firstly, the plot. I'm incredibly surprised that not many reviews that I've seen pick up on this, because if you've ever seen Stagecoach from 1939, then you will be instantly familiar with the plot of Neon City, due to it being beat for beat and blow for blow exactly the same as that John Ford classic. If this was a test, then the writer would surely have failed due to plagiarism. It seriously will someone please call a copyright lawyer territory. A group of strangers have to get from the civilized world to another part of the civilized world via crossing a dangerous wasteland populated by savages, defended only by a reluctant gunslinger, swapping out the Wild West for a post-apocalyptic snow-strewn desert and Apaches for gangs of mutants called Skins, then setting it all in 2053 rather than 1880, with the journey's trials and tribulations and the ending basically being the plot beats of Stagecoach, even down to the cast of characters travelling on it, or in an RV in this case. Michael Ironside plays the grizzled ex-Ranger Stark, who is now a bounty hunter who brings in bounties for credits. He's reluctant to travel shotgun to Neon City on the RV, but he's basically forced into it by his former commander. He's tasked with protecting Twink, who will be familiar to anyone who, like me, was a huge fan of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, as Juliet Landau, who played Drusilla for around 6 seasons on that show, is the actress. She's a rich politician's daughter from Neon City and must be protected at all costs. He also has to protect Vanity, who is Reno, a fugitive on the run who has a complicated and morally complex backstory that's revealed along the journey. Bulk is the driver of the RV, and in his last ever role before his untimely and tragic death of brain cancer is Lyle Alzado. He and Stark have a confrontational and potentially dangerous past together. The other people travelling to Neon City are Tom, a doctor who isn't quite what he seems, Stark's ex-wife, and Wing, a scientist who we find out is ultimately at fault for the apocalypse happening. The only real twists on Stagecoach here are the fugitive is a female, and Tom, rather than being a drunk, is in fact a serial killer pretending to be a doctor. Bar those changes, these are essentially colour palette swaps of the characters from Stagecoach. The cast are in the main part very solid for what is obviously a cheap made-for-TV 90s affair, with Ironside being the obvious standout. Only a few scenes look forced, for want of a better word. Even Vanity, more known for her music and being Prince's muse in the 80s, gives a pretty good performance in the Ringo Kid fugitive role. just some decent chemistry with Ironside too. I think the original script of this would have been interesting to see with those roles reversed, Ironside being the fugitive and her the kick-ass bounty hunter. Personally, I'm fine with B-movies ripping off entire plots of better movies and just transplanting them into a dystopian world if they do a good job at building that dystopia. Neon City does a decent job of reimagining two classics but building its own world. The cinematography really helps in this regards, perfectly utilising the Salt Lake County, Utah background they filmed in as the Wasteland. They also utilise similar cinematographic tricks to make the action scenes seem a little more exciting than they would have been otherwise, via various dynamic camera shots being used within and without the RV. The action scenes largely being just cars chasing the RV and people hanging out the windows shooting back otherwise, then ultimately something inexplicably exploding. The initial town, whose name I never caught, is a kind of ruined industrial type zone, all hulking rusting machinery and scrapped cars, a little like modern day Detroit in many respects. The wastelands are just that, and the ecological changes are also plot points, with the RV being attacked by poisonous gas clouds and something called the Bright, which is often something that gets overlooked in these kinds of movies. The threats in the wild uninhabited Badlands are quite often just roving gangs of maniacs and not the wilderness itself. So props for actually setting up, then paying off actual natural environmental threats. It's really effective world building, I think. Neon City, when they arrive, is exactly that, a very late 80s, early 90s vision of the future, where everyone for some unknown reason has awful hair and white suits. I'd love to know why this is a very common trope from this period. If you know, let me know in the comments. The budget is obviously somewhere between low and no budget, but they actually do a surprisingly good job at using that budget to decent effect, like in this scene.
Clear. Thank you very much, Joe.
Where they obviously didn't have the budget to animate a force field on the door, so just put in a couple of sound effects and a few lines of dialogue. It does help to sell the world. So many of these kind of films just find somewhere vaguely desolate, set fire to something, dress people in rags, and call it a day, which this absolutely does, but I do appreciate those extra touches of effort. The special effects are limited to a few showers of sparks and cars mainly exploding, and they are the kind of glorious car explosions only straight-to-video Drek can muster. Bonus points if it explodes whilst driving through something non-explosive, whilst that thing also explodes, because of course that happens in this film. So that was Neon City, a movie that doesn't have very much neon in it, and is essentially such a rip-off of the plot of Stagecoach you could legitimately call it a remake set in the Mad Max universe. Clearly made on a very small budget, but unlike a lot of the rip-offs from this era, I've seen at least it feels like a real movie, rather than just a very cheap cash grab. If you enjoyed that, then please like, comment and subscribe, and join me for the next month, where I'll once again be plumbing the depths of horror, starting out with Arcade.